Hi, I'm Jason Klom, and today on J of All Trades, I'm going to show you how I edit narration for audiobooks and specifically for narration-centric podcasts, not ones where I'm just bullshitting, you know. So welcome to J of All Trades. One of the things I do for a living is I narrate audiobooks. They're primarily educational audiobooks, though every once in a while I'm throwing something else, not usually like character stuff, but just, you know, sometimes it's even my own stuff. That's how I cut my teeth on it. That's how I learned how to do it. But the way I do it tends to be a little different than most people, in that I use tools that most people don't use because it's the stuff that I'm used to and that I do get good results out of. I'm going to pull up I sometimes use, I'll just show you the audio thing that I use sometimes. So this is Goldwave. I'm initializing a new sound. Now Goldwave they still make, but this is a 20-year-old version of this, and what you'll see behind it is Adobe Premiere, which is what I use. But here, test 1 2. This is what I tend to use. I'm obviously much more close to the mic when I actually do narration stuff. I'm not going to be doing it from a distance because I don't need to hide it from anybody, which, by the way, I think it's barely being hidden by this bit of a green screen paper tape that I've put up so that you don't notice it. Now you notice it. You're going to be able to think of nothing else. But this is what I record on usually if I'm doing a podcast, actually, or if I have some last-minute narration, because everything goes in through my Zoom H6, which is right here. Don't really have a camera on it. Can't really show it to you. It would be weird and pointless. But that's what I used to record on, and I typically record track by track. And when I screw up, I start a new track. And boy, do I screw up all the time. What I do, though, when I finally get those tracks, I get them usually in, I write down, which chapter has, which tracks to it. So Zoom gives you automatic numbers. So for this is a podcast that I do some narration for, and it is for The Pitch, which is a Kansas City-based magazine. And I read some of their articles, stuff that's sent to me by their, you heard that fun little noise, stuff that's sent to me by their editor, Brock Wilbur, who is a buddy of mine, and he agreed to let me read some stuff on their podcast because I figured, hey, take a little bit off your plate, and I'd get a little bit more practice. So they'll come in these forms. So every folder will come with a WAV file and an HPRJ file, which I don't have any need for the way I edit and the things that I do. I then import everything into Adobe Premiere, which is, if you don't know, primarily used for video editing, exclusively used for video editing. Oops, sorry about that. And primarily used for video editing. But this is how I use it because I like the track by track. I don't like many other audio editors in terms of the way they do nonlinear editing. I've had time to figure out what I like and what I don't like. I have my editing experience goes back to editing on a digital linear editing system, which is the video toaster on the Amiga. Maybe at some point I'll do a video on that because it's complicated. I don't own one, but there are plenty of people who've done videos on that kind of stuff. They're interesting to talk about. It is one of the most stressful ways to edit. But it is a good way to then finally appreciate what you have when you have something like Adobe Premiere. So what I do is, you can see I've imported all of my files, every single little bit of file, starting with this one. When it decides it wants to play. Not responding. Of course, it crashes right in the middle. This is what happens when you're running your streaming software and your editing software at the same time, and you have a computer that's a little bit too slow to handle those. So here, let's give this a shot. Fashionably Late. Black-owned brands are overdue for their spotlight, by J.M. Banks. Okay, so there you go. Those are words. You didn't need to know that these were words. These are waveforms. You know what they look like. But the manner in which I do that, I'm going to put on my headphones for this because I need to hear very specific stuff. Preferably, I actually wouldn't hear my own voice right now, but that's what's going to happen. And I will time-lapse this, speed this up in a little bit, but I'll give you a basic idea. So what I do is I listen to the last thing I said, which will probably involve me embarrassingly fucking up like I just did when I said that word just now. And then I overlap where I have decided to start over. And we'll just listen and see what this is. Black dollar, though without black owners. At the end of business, the black dollar... Okay, so... without black... Now, I will say sometimes I've gotten to the point where I can identify which waveform is which. Usually, I can usually say, oh, these are clearly the same waveform. I can see that and I tend to read things at roughly the same pitch and timbre and all that stuff. So there tends to not be much variation, though there is sometimes. And then as long as I know they're roughly timed up like this, though without black owners. At the end of this. So there you go. So that one line at least was timed up perfectly. And so hopefully then that resolves and retains the timing that I believe it should have been read in. Or have catered to the black community, though without black owners. It's best, obviously, to cut between words, although there are times I have learned finally the fine-tuning skills of cutting in the middle of a word if you know where you cut just before a plosive, or it depends on the word, it depends on the sounds your face is making as you're reading these things. So that's what I do in terms of just overlapping. You have to be careful if you're doing it in this way to not just leave it overlapped. When I edit audiobooks, I get a QC or quality control report back, and I will say there have been moments when you've just heard me double over like that, and they get a terrible sounding bit of audio. It's embarrassing, but it's a lesson. It's a lesson that's learned, and this is yet to happen. Now, right now I can see here, so right, that space, that break right there seems to be that break right there. So I know that roughly, yeah, so it's the same bit. You just got to time these up. Oh, well, it doesn't want to move. Now, one problem here. Now, this is imprecise. I'll be honest, but for what I'm doing, it's fine. But this is imprecise editing. If you were trying to edit down to the millisecond, if you wanted to chop out just the tiniest sound, this is not good for that. Because it does it by frames. So it turns this audio. This audio is not natively frames. This audio is natively just audio. It is bits. But Premiere needs to translate it into frames. I think I have this by default at 30 frames a second because I want the most frame. I want it chopped up the most possible, second by second. So here we'll play another. The black dollar leaves and ultimately enrich. I can hear it slightly off. Oh, there we go. Yep. It wouldn't affect the overall timing too much. One of the other things I have to keep an eye out for when I'm doing this is to make sure that I am not, that you're not getting when you have to do audiobooks, you have to edit out things like mouth sounds, like sometimes you don't notice you're making these disgusting mouth noises that are great for ASMR videos, but not so good for an audiobook. And definitely not good for people like myself who, if I hear those noises in something, it grates on my nerves. That's my problem. It's not the speaker's problem, but it does bother me. Although I don't always notice when I'm doing it, which is weird, whatever. One of the other things that I have to cut around are breaths, because while I've learned, I can't do circular breathing or anything, but I have learned to sort of pull my breaths in terms of, okay, I can do about a minute. I used to only be able to do about 20 seconds in a breath. Now I've gotten a little bit better about just like subtly pulling away from the mic and sucking in a breath silently so that I can get more. Because honestly, you see, this is for a short, it's going to end up being less than 10 minutes. So you don't want a million tracks. I've got more tracks here that I want to work with, but it's functional. And it'll be fine. So a few things to keep in mind if you decide you want to edit the way I do, which again, number one, give yourself as few tracks as possible, but don't force yourself. If you screw up, here's the problem that I had. The reason that I do this in chunks rather than one long chunk, and then just listen for the screw ups. That is, especially if you have OCD, the type of OCD I do, it will make you ill. Having to look at one long track and chop it. At least I know here I automatically have edits where I know I've screwed up. You just have to plan around it. I think the thing I was talking about before I had to pause for a moment was taking the taking of breaths. And that can be one of two things. So usually when I screw up, I babble. I say nonsense. And that's because, therefore, when it times up again, I will know that that's the useless bit of audio if I'm somehow confused. But also, I have to make sure that, and this is on me when I record, that I hit record. And then after I hit record, I take my breath if I have to. I should be taking one beforehand. But hit record, take my breath, and then edit from there. And these are things you have to be aware of. You have to make sure you haven't left a breath in, which, again, any of this kind of stuff can happen, even at a professional level, which is what I am, but it just can be, anybody can screw up. So what I'm going to do right now is take, what is this, 20 more screw-ups and chop them out and make this a whole piece of something. So, so what I'm going to do right now is chop up all those mistakes, chop them out, not just chop them up. It's not going to be a succession of mistakes, much fun as that might be to listen to for some. So I'm going to edit this, and then after I edit it, I will show you what I do to make it sound a little bit better, at least in the manner that I like to do it. Again, this is all the way I like to do this stuff, and it's the assembly line that I'm most comfortable with. And again, the type of OCD I have to have an assembly line ready. So here we go. Edit time. Right here is where I do a ripple delete. So if you're using, again, Adobe Premiere CS5, that's the other thing. I don't have the newest version of it because I don't need it. Again, for what I do, I mostly edit podcasts, and then the next most thing that I edit is audiobooks and this narration, which is basically audiobook editing. But for a podcast, it's just the most editing I would do for a podcast that isn't mine. So that's just something to keep in mind. So right here is one of those things that I think I was mentioning earlier. Can you cut in the middle of a word? You shouldn't, but you have to spot, where. The other thing is when things import as frames, they're not always going to perfectly sync up. That's why you're hearing that rough delay. I can't perfectly sync these up. If I had two waveforms in a something that's built just for waveforms, I could sync them up as perfectly as possible, at least the beginnings of them. Here you can see, like, this is the rough beginning of a word here, and then the rough beginning of a word here. They're about a frame apart, but when I move this frame in, that cuts out part of this word. So what I am probably going to do is slightly tweak the timing. You heard that. Well, are unique. You heard like me say twice. You heard the glottal stop twice. This should be good enough. Chief features are unique. Yeah, see, it sounds perfectly fine. As long as it flows, that's kind of the key. And timing is huge on all of this stuff. I usually edit comedy. I edit comedy albums and stuff, and timing is obviously massively important, most important there. But, if you're reading, I have to pace out sentences, then I pace out the paragraphs, then I pace out entire sections. So, the pauses they're in my head, but I know what those pauses are at every time. You don't want to lose that in the edit, which is one of the reasons why I'll repeat something so that I know with the timing between those two lines. It's not always that I screwed up one line, it's that I screwed up later on and I need the thing before. So, here we go. So here's one where I had to make a choice and I had to decide, do I cut that close to the word? Which here is Deontay. It's a little weird sounding because there's something missing on the ramp up to the D on from the S. And I normally wouldn't do this, but sometimes if you just cross over the tail end of one word in the two tracks, it blends enough. So here is Deontay Howard. Yeah, you don't notice that. Any other situation you'll notice, and it'll sound like a weird pop that was, just put in there artificially. And here it turns out I didn't even have to do that because I ended up starting back further, which sometimes I do. I'm very bad at notating when I've started over, like, several sentences back. So here's a big chunk that is a problem. I have started this afresh right here, but this original track I mumbled or something. I ran the words together. So
a loved one would be killed for,
you know, you hear it. So that's the beginning of the word killed, but this also, there, that little pop is the beginning of it. So I may actually have to use the mumbly version for part of it.
a loved one would killed for simple.
Yeah, see, would killed, so I missed that.
One would be killed for.
Ideally, I want to get this would turned in. It's just finding the right.
One would be killed.
It's finding the right spot.
One would be killed.
Yeah, you hear it. There's a chance I have to re-record some of it. No, it's rare, but
one would be killed. One would be killed.
Nope. So maybe I just chopped it at the wrong spot.
Be killed for one would be killed for simply.
Yeah, it's fine. That is doable.
Simply being at each day, worrying whether a loved one would be killed for.
Yeah, it was not a mumble, but I ran the words together more than maybe in some other spots, but it's fine. Yep. Okay, and so there is that. So there's the beginning. I always like a little space at the beginning. More than this actually is preferable, but it's actually, since this is for a podcast, they're going to cut it together the way they cut it together. They're not going to cut this anymore, but they're going to cut it into the podcast however they do. They don't require a ton of head space or tail space. This probably takes longer than other applications typically do, but here I have to export it. Last thing I exported was a video apparently, and I'm going to do it as a waveform because that is uncompressed, and any of the stuff that I'm going to have to any of the filters I'm going to have to put over it to make it sound a little bit better, you really don't want to do that over something that is already compressed. And I feel like I guess I should point out that, so this is an exception, I think I mentioned, to my normal podcast workload, because I normally just do conversational podcasts. I edit out stuff where we're searching for something, or we say something stupid, or that I just don't want out there, like personal bit of information. For this, this is unusual for a podcast. This is very much my same workload that I do for audiobooks, and it's already exported. So I'm going to load this in. I typically do educational audiobooks. I am always looking to do other audiobooks, but my big reason for not doing them is every time I get offered one, it seems to be something where I have to do a lot of very specific character voices, and character voices are my expertise. However, people tend to ask me to do all kinds of fun character voices, including some of which are people of different races and backgrounds than I am, and I'm not comfortable doing that. So that is one reason why I'm not in a lot of fiction audiobooks as of yet. Keeping an eye out always. So I'm loading this into Audacity. Audacity, again, its workflow is very simple for me. I've got it set to what I need. So I'm re-exporting it right now because I realized I exported it as a stereo file, which is useless for narration, that you're not going to be adding any kind of special effects to. So we're going to import it again. And again, I'm going to normalize it. Basically, you don't want it to be, you don't want the noise to be too loud. You don't want the entire file to be too loud. So I'm going to normalize. There you go. There's the peak amplitude. And next I'm going to be normalizing the loudness, and you'll see the settings that I use for that as well. Again, these are all based off of when you're given instructions by a company, you go off of those as your default. At least I do. So normalize the LUFS, which is a loudness measurement, to -23, and you should see this waveform is gonna tighten up a little bit. Again, as you can tell, it's one of those weird things when you do audiobooks, especially now, you're expected to do all of this yourself, even if you don't know anything about it. Now, I know plenty about it, but, I'm not an audio engineer, even though I've been essentially engineering audio my whole life. So what I'm doing right now is selecting a bit of silence that I think should be typical of the whole thing. So I'm going to listen, make sure there's no voice noises or anything. Shouldn't be, but you'll see it's moving here, so that means there's some actual noise. It's not just a accidental bit of silence. So for noise reduction, what we do here is get a noise profile. It's going to use that as the general thing for the it's going to use that as a template for the whole thing. So let's get noise reduction in here, and it's going to use the noise profile you already used. Now for me, this is kind of strong, and the reason that is because my space is not perfect right now, that I have had to record some of the podcast stuff in. Not as soundproof as I would like for the podcast stuff. I have a separate space that I use for the audiobooks, so I have this set for that, and this will be good. And well, actually, what I'll do is I'll turn off my audio in a second to play you back how silent the silences are here, because you can hear noise in here. You can hear my computer running. Again, I don't have this mic right up on my mouth. So,
Fashionably Late. Black-owned brands are overdue for their spotlight, by J.M. Banks.
So you hear a lot more silent. You can hear it's a bit compressed. Again, more than I would like, and that's to compensate for some of the noise you hear in this particular space. So right now what I'm going to do is, again, export it as a wave. I prefer to give a wave if only because they're, give a wave. I prefer to do that if possible, because I'll sound better in it, and you don't want any weirdness to be blamed on you. But some people do specifically request MP3s. So we'll just export there. And there we go. And so that's the whole thing, and that's how I do it when I do my audiobooks. I obviously have slightly different settings for the noise reduction if it's ever necessary, because there's this stuff where I am right now, traffic noise and stuff. You don't want that in an audiobook. You don't want to be anywhere near. I have done audiobooks in this space before, and it is rough. It is very difficult to do. So yeah, you have to do a lot more work and a lot more chopping. So there you go. That is how I tend to edit audiobooks, again, roughly, but this is very specifically a thing for The Pitch, which is a great magazine. The name of their podcast is Streetwise. I'll actually pull that up right now. So this is Streetwise, thepitchkc.com/Streetwise. And so there you go. I read their magazine story. I'm usually in these once a week or so. There's just really great, important stories in The Pitch. You should give them a listen and read it, obviously, but if you want a quick hit, listen to I literally just saw a quick hit right there and said the same thing. I'm an idiot. I'm an absolute well, I saw robots, so I was gonna say I'm a robot, but I'm not. Rob Hot's Gummies. There you go, free ad for that place. Anyway, there we are. That's me. That's how I edit. That's one thing I edit. That's not how I edit podcasts. I may do a separate thing on how I edit podcasts. May do a little bit of separate thing about reading audiobooks. I don't know. If you want to recommend anything, feel free. You can email me, jason@stolendress.com. Tweet at me @jklamm, JKLAMM, and my phone number will be at the end of this video. Thanks so much for joining me, and that's it, I guess. I guess. Bye.